Welcome back into Full Throttle, everyone. My name is Lauren Downey. I'm your host, and along with my co-host, this is Chase, and we're going to talk with our NASCAR insider now, Jeff Cheatham, about the season previews. We're going to go by team in order that they finished in the chase. So, of course, we're going to start with our champion at Penske Racing, Brad Keselowski. But, Jeff, for Penske, we're coming off a roller coaster season. You have the champion, and then you have a carousel of drivers in the 22 car, but of course that slot being filled this offseason with Joey Logano, that big addition. But let's start with the two-team first. Of course, Miller Lite coming back and going to be signed through 2015. A new look for that car. Paul Wolfe coming back. Really no changes on that team. And of course, Brad Keselowski. This championship run in 2012 and into the offseason has really been a phenomenal thing for the Rochester Hills, Michigan native. And he's represented the sport just excellent, in my opinion, in this offseason, going to the new Gen 6 car.
Yeah, he's been a pretty remarkable spokesperson for having such a young career as a champion in NASCAR. You know, he does things spontaneously, he speaks his mind, and consequently enough, he always seems to come up with just about the right thing to say innately without having to be coached. So, as a former public relations representative for drivers, he's the kind of guy you want to work with.
Well, it doesn't. He also seems like he doesn't care what kind of shape he's like on national TV either, judging by that ESPN interview last season.
Yeah, you know, but I like that. You know, that's kind of a little bit, you know, at least from a fan's perspective, clamoring for this type of behavior for years and years and years, saying, how come these drivers are so vanilla, so boring, we never get to see their personalities? And I've always been one of the ones that says as soon as the driver starts to show a little bit of personality, usually in some form of a dust-up with another driver, everyone on the media, on the bandwagon jumps on it and says, oh, how can you do that? You know, you've got sponsors to worry about. It's really a catch-22, and the drivers understand this wholeheartedly. But Brad Keselowski's done a great job, you know, more or less staying out of trouble, you know, getting to the forefront when he needs to, saying when he needs to say things. But he did a tremendous job at the banquet, winging it with his victory speech, and he did a tremendous job. And like I said, I look forward to having him as a designated champions representative as we go into the 2013 season.
And if you think about it, I mean, this team, you could consider them a favorite, if not the favorite, going into 2013, because with Paul Wolfe back, you've got them going to Fords, which is going to be, in my opinion, one of the best things that's going to happen to this Penske race team. Of course, Dodge was, you know, phenomenal towards the end. The horsepower was there, and there was no really clear reason for them to leave. You know, Penske was their only operating team in the Cup Series, but nevertheless, they still left NASCAR, and now we're going to Fords with out of Roush Yates' engine department for Penske Racing. And Brad Keselowski going to field this team, really going to be the captain, if not for the captain, Roger Penske. But now let's look at Joey Logano, the addition of Joey in the 22 car. You know, a lot of people were speculating that Joey may have would go back to the Nationwide Series, and whether it's for Joe Gibbs or not. But no, he's going to stay in the Cup Series and race for Roger Penske. Now you have two drivers under the age of 30 racing for Roger Penske, and that's something that really Roger Penske has not been used to with the long running of Rusty Wallace.
Yeah, I think that, you know, the situation you have with Joey Logano entering into the season, driving the Spinzoll car, is a lot like what you had A.J. Allmendinger at the beginning of last season. You have a situation in which you might not have expected Joey Logano to get that ride of that caliber, but he did. But the spotlight is going to be so completely focused on him. I think a lot of people are going to really scrutinize how well he's able to perform in that car, because he's never really been with another Cup team before, and everyone had such unbelievably high expectations for this driver, and he flat out hasn't delivered. He's done remarkable in the Nationwide Series, but people were really under the impression that he was going to be more of the next Brad Keselowski than Brad Keselowski. So I think if I were going into the season, I was Joey Logano, I would not take a single race off. I'd make sure that I was up on the wheel every single lap, because he's going to get a lot of extra attention, because you can't blame it on the equipment or the situation if you're with a completely different team, and that's what he's faced with this year.
Do you think that Joey is going to see a lot more success with Penske than he did with Joe Gibbs Racing?
That is such a toss-up because I do see both of those organizations as being pretty much equal in caliber in terms of personnel, horsepower, and the design that goes into these race cars. That's why I think doubly it's on him. It's his ability and his talent that's going to be speaking volumes for what ends up becoming this 2013 year for him. Like I said, I don't envy him. I wouldn't want to be in that position. I think people have sat back and have waited long enough to see just how great this kid's going to be, and now it is really put up or shut up time for him.
And you talk about some of the changes that's coming. Really, Todd Gordon going to return as the crew chief for 2013. Logano's also going to have a new spotter in Tab Boyd after spending a year with Danica Patrick and Juan Pablo Montoya in 2012. You talk about these drivers. You were a driver once, Jeff, and you talk about new voices in your ear. And you were with Matt Kenseth for a year. New voices in his ear wasn't really the era of the Robbie Reiser ran organization, but talk about how that can affect a driver positively more than negatively in a new season.
Well, people need to understand one thing here. The spotter does most of the talking in that driver's ear. The crew chief pretty much is heard when the driver makes a comment or when it's time to pit. The other 85% of the time, it's that spotter in your ear. And I don't want to give your fans the impression that a spotter's just there to say clear high, clear low, car on your quarter, this guy's around the high line. These guys do so much more than that. They're reporting on which drivers on the track are the fastest, what lines they're running. More importantly, they end up being more or less of a cheerleader for these drivers because they're the ones working with them the most. I can remember a few instances with different drivers I've worked with over the years where if they felt they've been wronged on the racetrack, they'll start to lose their temper. Sometimes like an outburst over the radio when they feel like they've been completely wrong. It's up to the spotter at that point to jump in and say, forget about that, you're faster than him, get back up on the wheel, concentrate, hit your marks. They're really more of a cheerleader than just a provider of safety out there on that racetrack. That's why that relationship is so important. And you talked earlier about Tab Boyd. There's a former driver himself. Mm-hmm. Those are the best type of spotters to have because they've sat behind the steering wheel in a race car just the same way these guys are doing it. But it's in my opinion, it's a pretty overlooked role. I would sure like to see some NASCAR, programs get on board with doing a production piece on a lot of these different spotters. Some of them have so many of their own personalities and Twitter followers. I had the good fortune to work with Mike Kalanoff for years and years and years because he was Matt Kenseth's mainstay, and these guys just really worked well together. They really meshed well together, and when things are going well, sometimes the things that Mike Kalanoff would say could go down in a book about jokes. It was hilarious. He would say things like, if this guy was running any higher line, he'd be in the first row of seats, or he'd say something that would always kind of liven up the mood. And you do need that because it takes an intense amount of concentration to wheel these stock cars around on the edge of spinning out every single lap. But he was able to get the best out of Matt Kenseth, calm him down when he got mad, which wasn't often, but it did happen. And, like I said, these guys are the soothing voice that comes through that radio to help a driver concentrate and bear down. And oftentimes get to play the role of cheerleader at the end of the race. You're gaining on this guy a tenth of a second, another tenth of a second. You've got to catch him. You're going to get this guy. There's a whole lot more to it than just clearing high and low.
And it's interesting you bring up how important a spotter is to these teams and to these drivers. Of course, we just got off the phone with our new weekly segment with Eddie DeHaan, and he, it's amazing. The spotters always get mentioned at the super speedways because of their importance. And he was telling us, at the test, they didn't have a lot of time to go in the pack racing, but he actually wanted to see what Jeff Gordon sees in that cockpit. So when they got back to the shop, Eddie DeHaan jumped in that 24 car, the Daytona 500 car that they're taking down there to run on Sunday in the 55th running of the Daytona 500, and he wanted to see where are his mirrors, what's his field of vision. And he actually brought up a really good point with these new Gen 6 cars, that the field of vision out the rear view is much less, and it was even smaller, right now than when we had the car tomorrow.
That's right, and that was a big change too in 2007 when they had that gigantic rear wing on the back. It really reduced the visibility, and you can see again why they didn't like that tandem racing. If you were the guy pushing in the back, you couldn't even see out the front. So it must be terrifying at times to be in that type of a position, running as fast as these guys are, inches apart, and not be able to see. I had the good fortune of being able to participate in the Chump Car Series race at Charlotte Motor Speedway, and trust me, we were going about half the speed those drivers do at a real race. I was out on the track all by myself, and it was all I could do to keep the thing going in a straight line. I couldn't imagine doing this with cars on the inside, outside, in front of me, behind me. I gained a new level of respect. I already had respect to begin with, but a new level of respect for these guys, because I promise you, if you guys ever get a chance to do one of the driving experiences, not only will you have the time of your life, but at the same time, you're going to come away from that saying, I don't know how in the world these other guys do this.
Yeah, and that's we hear that a lot with people that go to their first, race, and especially if you're doing the driving experience, as you mentioned. And let's move right into Michael Waltrip Racing. Of course, you had the 15 that finished second in the points, made that incredible run for Clint Boyer. After finishing second in the Sprint Cup Series, moving to Michael Waltrip Racing, after 2011, it was an underdog year for Clint Boyer, and we didn't expect him to exceed the way he did in 2012. And to look at 2013 now, everybody's got their eyes on Clint Boyer.
I can remember a famous quote that came out when Clint Boyer announced he was no longer going to be at RCR Racing, and one of the sports beat writers ended up writing the end of a sentence that read something along the lines of, now Clint Boyer is headed to Michael Waltrip Racing, where careers go to die. Mm-hmm. And instead, they placed two cars in the chase, and one of them finished second and has a shot at winning it until a very unfortunate incident, there in Phoenix a couple races before the end of the season. So I expect great things out of them, because now they're going to be able to replicate their success. First, you have to kind of get there and get a taste of it to realize what you're doing right. There's a lot of teams out there that are floundering, running 12th every week, running 14th every week, don't even know how to replicate success because they haven't had it. Well, now Michael Waltrip's had it, so they understand it. They're going to be able to say, if we just do the same things we did last year, we should be in the same position heading into the championship this year. And I wouldn't be surprised to see him right back up there in it.
And just looking at Clint Boyer's 2012 stats really quick, he won at 3 completely different racetracks. Sonoma, which is the road course.
That was a surprise win for that team.
And then Richmond being the short track, and then Charlotte, one of our mile-and-a-halfs on the schedule. The only blemish that I really see with his stats last year is the 4 DNFs that he had. Without those DNFs, setting aside Phoenix, that was a special situation, he could have been right up there winning the championship.
That's right. That's why I wouldn't be the slightest bit surprised. He's really in the prime of his career right now. A lot of people were convinced it was over when he left Richard Childress Racing, because that is a powerhouse organization. But Michael Waltrip Racing kind of served this last year to say, we can also be one of those powerhouse organizations.
And, the one thing that's really, I think, vital for Clint Boyer in 2013, really the decision to bring Brian Patty back, I think is only going to make this team, get them right back to where they were last year. I mean, obviously, you had the run going into Phoenix, into the second to last race of the year, and then to have the unfortunate incident between him and Jeff Gordon, that obviously set this team back. But going into Homestead, Brian Petty was the guy on the radio saying, "Hey man, we have a shot at second. We have a shot at second in the championship in the NASCAR Sprint Cup Series. That means something." That's the kind of voice you want to have as a crew chief in a driver like Clint Boyer, who has a very short fuse. That's the kind of voice you want in your ear.
That's right. That's right. And, again, it comes back to they did have, I told you many times during the chase that when you get in between places, second in the points, third in the points, fourth in the points, fifth in the points, go back and look at the amount of money that is won. Mm-hmm. There are millions of dollars in difference between those two. So you're racing for $1 million extra if you could just finish one position higher in the points. And, the fans may not realize what a big deal that is, but I assure you it's on the driver's minds very, very much. They can go back and look and see what the payouts were the year before and pretty much realize, hey, if I can just, make up 6 more positions on the racetrack, that's another $1.5 million in my pocket at the end of the year.
And going back to Brian Patty and Clint Boyer, not only, we were talking about spotters being a cheerleader, not only do they have to do that, but the crew chiefs also have to be able to step up to bat for the drivers and defend them with the decisions that they make on the racetrack. And Brian Patty definitely did that. If you saw the interview that he made after Phoenix, he was right there defending Clint Boyer and how his team was wronged that race. And I really think Clint Boyer has a ton of respect for him, and that's what's going to make a driver and a crew chief really gel, is when they respect each other.
That's true. I mean, I had the privilege of working with Matt Kenseth when he was with Robbie Reiser. And if you don't know the history between those two, you need to go much further back than when they first got into NASCAR. These were two bitter rivals on the short tracks of Wisconsin. Kaiser faction, there was the Kenseth faction, and to see these two guys teamed up and the magic that they were able to make when they got on the same side of things was truly remarkable. I mean, these guys had each other's back. They knew instinctively what the other was thinking, and that's an irreplaceable factor when you get down to as high stakes as we get in this sport. You know, you've got to have somebody you can communicate with. That's why I feel so strongly that Brent Keselowski is going to be a force for years to come if he can keep Paul Wolf with him. These guys have made an incredible duo. They've accomplished something at a very young time in their careers, much the same way Chad Knaus and Jimmy Johnson did, and they're still the longest running crew chief driver combination in the garage for a particular reason. So I think a lot of these other teams out there are figuring out, if we can get off to a good start like this early in our careers with somebody, I'm going to carry them all the way. And I like to see that too, just for the continuity's sake.
Hey, let's not forget about that Ray Evernham and Jeff Gordon duo too back in the '90s. I know it's been a little while, but we can't forget about them either.
3 championships in a matter of not a long matter of time. So that's you know, actually let's talk about Ray Evernham for just a quick second. There was some news that came out this week from Ray Evernham that said a news story that he was offered, quote, a job with a high stakes team, a high level team that was not Hendrick Motorsports, but he didn't want to deal with the ego of the driver. Anything you can tell us about that? Any ideas you have about that? Who that might
I knew about the report that came out, but I really honestly must not have read the second part of that. That's why he didn't take the job. I might not have read far enough down into the article, but if it had to do with the driver's ego, well, there's a few of them I can think of right off the bat. None that I'd care to repeat, but at the same time, I mean, I've always said this: if you're a crew chief in this business and you jump out of it and go to the broadcasting booth, for instance, like a Larry McReynolds, I don't see Larry McReynolds coming back into the garage this year and going in there and able to just keep up with the miles and miles, no pun intended, of advancements that have gone on with these cars. You could sure call a race, sure, but I mean, if you're not in this every single year and seeing every last technological twist and tweak that you could get, that you could stay apprised of, I don't see you having much success. But I'll tell you another thing. Back in 2009, I remember hearing a rumor about Ray Evernham with a very big name driver and his potential offer to come out of retirement to help them at that time when this particular driver was struggling. Again, no names, but should be pretty easy to figure out.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're all on the same page with that. But let's quickly end with end our preview of Michael Waltrip Racing with really the carousel of drivers that's in the 55 Aaron's Dream Machine. Of course, Mark Martin. He's going to run 24 races, including this Saturday's Sprint Unlimited. Michael Waltrip will run the Daytona 500, as well as the Talladega races. And then you have Brian Vickers. Brian Vickers is going to run the rest of the schedule for that team, competing full-time in the Nationwide Series, going to run part-time with this 55 in the Cup. But next year, Mark Martin has no contract nor necessarily plans to run at MWR in 2014. He says he does not want to get out of a race car. He just probably won't be back with Michael Waltrip. Brian Vickers, let's ponder the thought of a full-time, back in NASCAR Sprint Cup Series full-time with Michael Waltrip Racing.
I think that's all but a done deal, and to be honest with you, if I was him, I would certainly head right through this year as planned and not make any waves, because he's going to be taking over a pretty amazing car and crew over there at Michael Waltrip Racing. That's a very solid, steady ride, and considering what he's gone through over the last couple of years, actually the last 3 to 4 years, he'd be lucky to basically get what I would consider the second phase of his career continuing forward. I still would not be surprised to see Mark Martin win a race this year. He's certainly capable of winning, especially at places like Dover or these, technical tracks like Pocono. He's extraordinarily smart, and he's still pretty much from a fitness point of view, wipe the deck with a lot of these younger guys. He's pretty amazing when you get up at 3 or 4 in the morning and work out, I don't know, all day long.
Well, with Brian Vickers, you had talked about the 3 or 4 years where it's been really up and down for him. Not only do I think he's really matured as a driver, he has matured as a person, just based on everything that he's gone through the past few years.
Well, he needs to start resurrecting that right after the Phoenix race there a couple of years ago, because he really didn't do himself any favors taking out a championship contender. It was the same thing you saw happen at Phoenix this year. For whatever reason, it looks like Phoenix is the place to take out a contender. Now that I think about it, but maybe they could use that in their marketing materials. You never know. But yeah, I think what you're saying carries a lot of weight.
And Brian Vickers running in the Nationwide Series full time. I mean, you talk about some of the guys that are going back to that series. I mean, Sam Hornish will be back out of the 22, as we know, in the Cup Series. He ran that when A.J. Allmendinger was fired. But going back to Penske full-time in the Nationwide Series, you've got Regan Smith going back to the Nationwide Series, as we mentioned, Brian Vickers, and then you have Trevor Bayne jumping into Ricky Stenhouse's former ride. I mean, this Nationwide Series for NASCAR is going to be very competitive in 2013.
Yeah, it is. It just always seems like they never can really find a footing for their identity. And I hope this year, again, you have such an influx of people that are not regular Cup stars that they might actually have a chance at carving out that niche, because competitive racing is what people want to see. And they don't want to see, the Kyle Bushes and people like that coming down and just stealing all the trophy money and, lapping the entire field. So now, with the advent of a lot of these drivers that are going to go back down and run a full-time schedule, I think you might have a chance at them kind of people maybe paying a little bit more attention on Saturdays. It'll help the ticket sales at these places where, of course, they run the Saturday and Sunday events.
Absolutely, and it's going to be interesting. We're going to have to keep our eyes on that. And the Camping World Truck Series as well is also going to be very competitive. But speaking of competitive, I mean, we're going to go right into Hendrick Motorsports. And, of course, all four of these drivers making the chase last year. One more a little more exciting than the other. Jeff Gordon, of course, making it in by 3 points at Richmond, thanks to a rain delay and thanks to Alan Gustafson's gutsy calls. We talked to Eddie DeHaan earlier about that. But, Rick Hendrick this time last year, at the Hendrick Motorsports Media Day, said that he would be extremely disappointed if all four cars did not make the chase. And really, that's the same situation this year. And after seeing, Jimmy Johnson fell off, finished third towards the end of the season. However, Kasey Kahne was the guy who rose to the occasion in the chase, picked up the fourth place finishing spot in the chase. And that, for me, that proved Kasey Kahne at Hendrick Motorsports, and it's only going to be up from here.
It was about a year ago on your show when I had to basically, I made my prediction, ended up having to eat some serious crow at the end of the year. I was convinced that Kasey Kahne was not going to have anywhere near a successful year, miss the chase, and be lucky to, mesh with his new crew. He completely proved me wrong. I see Kasey Kahne always up there, always in contention, but, I really want to see something out of him this year that proves that he's been in this sport long enough and driven for these different teams and has enough seasoned experience to get up there and do what Brad Keselowski did in the chase last year, get in there and take control of it and refuse to lose, because that's what ended up winning. That I think for a long time there, you could take a look at Jimmy Johnson's reign of terror, and it almost just seemed as if people were just too afraid to challenge the guy. It was just this ivory tower that you were going to ruin yourself running up against. And then you get someone like Brad Keselowski, and the seminal moment for the entire season, in my opinion, happened on the front stretch of Texas, coming through the dogleg with 3 laps to go, when they banged fenders. He came on the radio and said, "I refuse to lose this championship." At that moment, I thought, my God, he might could really win this thing. We kept waiting for him to stumble week after week. I think, Lauren, you remember, you and I were talking, he'll have a bad race this time and he'll be out of it, or something's going to go wrong. Jimmy Johnson's just too tight, and he refused to give up. And I think now he's given everyone a roadmap. If you really want to win the championship, if you really want to knock off Jimmy Johnson, who will again be the favorite to win this Cup title as the season begins, you now know what you have to do to get it done.
And going back to Kasey Kahne, let's not overlook that relationship between him and Kenny Francis. I mean, Kenny Francis has been with him for a long time. He went from Red Bull to Hendrick with him. I really think they have the combination to be a championship contender and a champion, if not this year, definitely in the future.
Yeah, he's in better shape now than he's ever been. And like I said, he's not a youngster to this sport. He's been in it a few years now and has driven for some different teams. Drove for Evernham's Dodge organization, has this great opportunity with Hendrick Motorsports that he waited to get,
He's driven for every manufacturer in NASCAR to date. So, I mean,
Lauren, you and your facts, I swear.
I mean, it's Kasey Kahne was he was really one of the guys that we were looking out for a long time when he was at Evernham, and then when Evernham went down, it was, where is this guy going to go? Because he's too talented to be in the Nationwide Series. Went to Red Bull for a year, and then, of course, that led into Hendrick. But it's, this is going to be, we said last year, this is going to be a pivotal year for Kasey Kahne. This year, we're past the pivotal year as far as making a name for yourself. It's time to prove that he's championship worthy. As Chase mentioned, Hendrick Motorsports is the best team with the best equipment, with the best drivers, and really, I mean, you have the best owner in NASCAR. Rick Hendrick is by far above and beyond what at the level, the consistency level of a lot of these other race teams. But you talk about Kasey Kahne's teammate Jeff Gordon. This being maybe his pivotal year, because the roller coaster that was 2012 for this 2014. But you look at going into Daytona. It's been I believe it's been 9 years since Jeff Gordon won on a restrictor plate track. That's hard to believe.
It is now that you mentioned it.
Yeah, the last win was when he
He's
swept
certainly somebody that people are going to want to draft with. He has so much experience, I mean, say what you want. When you get to these restrictor plate tracks, these people are nervous.
Mm-hmm.
They want to run with someone that's been out there for 10 years, has driven these tracks dozens of times, knows what they're doing, as opposed to being around someone, and there are going to be a few of those as well, that don't know what they're doing. Daytona can be a pretty scary place, and you definitely do not want to have a lap 2 accident in the Daytona 500 like Jimmy Johnson had. And
Eddie DeHaan brought up the interesting point that Jeff Gordon opened the season at Daytona last year barrel rolling in the final laps of the Budweiser shootout, and this year hopefully going to have a different outcome. At least maybe not the win, but 4 wheels on the ground would be nice.
Yeah, exactly, and there's no guarantee of that. I keep thinking back to Kyle Busch's unbelievable performance of saving that car going through turns 1 and 2 and coming back to win that race with a fairly damaged car. Yeah,
and Kyle Busch, the best at, one of the top talents, and we're going to talk about Joe Gibbs on the next show, but go ahead.
Another driver that I do not want to overlook at Hendrick Motorsports is Dale Earnhardt Jr. I'm sure we'd have fans that'd be very upset if we didn't mention him. I also think this is a very important year for Dale Earnhardt Jr. because still doesn't have a championship. And looking at his stats, he didn't have any DNFs last year. He did have his 1 win at Michigan, which broke him back into victory lane, which is very popular. I really think that to just close out his career, because he's 38 years old, which is hard to believe. He needs to win at least one championship, and I'm sure Junior Nation would be very happy.
Does that prove if Dale Earnhardt Jr., whether it's in 2013 or not, is he a legend in NASCAR with no championships?
He will be a legend in NASCAR simply because he's Dale Earnhardt's son, but by the same token, I do think he has differentiated himself enough and had a successful enough career to where if he walked away tomorrow by his own choice, he would be remembered as one of the greats that was in this sport. Did he underachieve? I think it's kind of hard to make a case that he didn't in a lot of cases, but he did go through some things, a lot of personnel changes, a lot of big changes in his personal life, and if you haven't ever experienced a situation in your own personal life that affected your school or your work environment, I don't think you've lived. And he's done a tremendous job at least being resilient and able to come back. And there's not a person out there that doesn't think he's not capable of winning a race. Every weekend he shows up at the racetrack, maybe with the exception of the road courses, but I think even he would admit that. I think he does have to get another win this year to prove last year wasn't just a fluke. And I'd like to see if he had multiple wins, because if he's able to come out of the gate strong, get some confidence under his belt, I do think he's one of those drivers that a little bit of confidence goes a long way, whereas some other drivers are able to compartmentalize and just go into each and every race differently. If he's able to build up some of that confidence, he could make a run at not only getting in the chase, but making some noise finally.
And with that relationship with Steve Letarte, that it's definitely gone a long way, and Letarte has definitely helped him. And if you look at last year, they ran up front a lot. It's just not every race they were able to close out the deal and get that really good finish that they deserve.
That's absolutely right. Like I said, I think he's meshed with Steve Letarte. I think that guy's going to be his crew chief for quite some time to come. And that was hard to replace. You go back and look at early in his career, he was guided where he was by the Uries, which was his cousins and his family, tightest members. And to come away from that and work with a couple of unknowns and then come back and try and work with some different people and didn't work out. Finally, you'd have a hard time believing anybody would want to take the job as Dale Earnhardt Jr.'s crew chief, but Steve Letarte stepped into that breach and has done a tremendous job with it. And what a lot of people would tell you is probably the hardest job in the garage.
And let's not forget that Dale Earnhardt Jr. has a Daytona 500 trophy in his trophy case at home. So that's, restrictor plate tracks, you think of Earnhardt's and you think of Dale Jr. as, obviously following right in his dad's footsteps at this track. And, when you go to Daytona, you can't help but think about the name Earnhardt. And, Jeff, we're going on 12 years on the 18th. So thoughts on that? Thoughts on 12 years of not having Dale Earnhardt?
Yeah, it's got to be still tough when you see the memorials and stuff. I used to live less than a mile from DEI back when I was in Mooresville for some of the time that I was there, and it was just amazing. Every time around that year, they would have to open up these fields across the street from the shop because there were just so many thousands and thousands of people that wanted to come pay their respects and remember a living legend. And I still promise you, there's a reason why he has a merchandise trailer at every racetrack to this day. He's the only non-living driver that brings a souvenir trailer to the racetrack and still sells merchandise. That's an amazing thing. He meant a lot to the sport. How he was taken from us was unbelievably tragic set of circumstances. And if you take a look at what Dale Earnhardt had to do, people talk about he had to grow up fast. I mean, that's one thing, but I can't even imagine being in his shoes and being able to get out there and compete on a week-in, week-out basis. And he had some of his best years just a couple of years after that happened. I can remember 2004, he won 6 races in 2004.
And one of them being the July race at Daytona.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
It's a situation that is hard to imagine, as you mentioned, but for Dale Earnhardt Jr., it's all about moving forward with him. He's always had that attitude of not necessarily getting out of his dad's shadow, but at the same time making his own name. And I think this 2013 season, we say it every year, this is an important year for Dale Earnhardt Jr., but coming off of the way he really started, and then in the summer, kind of won at Michigan in June, but then laid off towards the end of August and going into the chase. He proved that he can get back to victory lane. He proved he can run top 5 races. Can he finish it? That's going to be the storyline in 2013 for Dale Earnhardt Jr. But that's going to do it for Jeff tonight. Jeff, thank you so much for joining us, and we're going to be back on the air with you next week at 7:20. So thank you again for your time tonight.
You bet. I appreciate you allowing me to be a part of this.
All right.
Thank you.
And that's our NASCAR insider, Jeff Cheatham. And that's going to do it for this special show. Chase, thanks a lot. I didn't get a chance in the beginning to welcome you to the show, but I'm very excited to bring Chase along. You're a senior transfer from Miami of Ohio University, so welcome to BG as well.
Oh, thank you very much. I am super excited to be here. This is a great opportunity for me and to build my career. And I mean, the name that you've created so far and your NASCAR career is phenomenal, and hopefully we have a couple good years together here at Bowling Green State University, and I'm just ready for the 2013 NASCAR season, ready to get it going.
I think we all feel that way, and of course, again, this Saturday night, 8 p.m. and on the Fox Network. So that's going to be the Sprint Unlimited, formerly the Budweiser Shootout. And if you haven't voted yet, get on your smartphones, because the new NASCAR app for 2013 is allowing you, the fans, to really set up this race. What kind of segments do you want? Do you want to go 20, 30, 20? Do you want to go 20, 40, 10? It's all up to the fans. And then you can choose what kind of pit stops. Do you want them only to make 2-tire pit stops? Do you want them to make 4-tire pit stops? But the one rule is, NASCAR said, the gas man can only pump gas into the cars. They cannot make wedge adjustments or any other adjustments just in this Sprint Unlimited race. So that's going to make for an interesting time for these tire carriers, is that's going to throw off, you really have to practice that going into the race, because the routines of these pit crews are top notch. So that's going to be an interesting point. Again, the Sprint Unlimited this weekend officially kicking off the 2013 season for NASCAR. Going to be one of the best ever with this new Gen 6 car.
I tell you what, I think the Sprint Unlimited this year, it's going to be an even bigger race than the All-Star race, to be completely honest with you. It's going to be so exciting. I mean, I know I already voted on my on my Sprint phone, and I mean, I want to see eliminating drivers. I want to see 4-tire pit stops. I mean, anything that's just going to make this exciting for the fans, I'm all for.
And remember, you can vote also starting, I believe it's starting today, that you can, the lineup for these drivers to start the race. If you want the Daytona 500 pole winner from last year and then all the way up to the Homestead pole winner from 2012, that's how you want them lined up, go ahead and make your vote. If not, we're going to draw random, or the fans can vote random, that is, again, on your Sprint NASCAR app in the App Store, whether you have an iPhone or if you have an Android phone, you can do either. So for Trace Wilhelm, I'm Lauren Downey. Thank you so much for joining us on Full Throttle Radio tonight. I hope you enjoyed this special episode. We will be back on the airwaves of 88.1 WBGU FM next week, and we will be leading into the 55th running of the Daytona 500. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter at Full Throttle Radio. I want to thank my guests tonight, Eddie DeHaan and Jeff Cheatham. For my co-host Chase, I'm Lauren. Have a great evening.